My subject that I have been assigned is, can a Christian serve in the military and or the police? Well, Jeff stole my thunder this morning. Well, I was going to say yes and tell Bruce I can give you time back, but I don't believe that's what you're really looking for. So we'll just go into it and discuss this particular subject. We need to understand that God has always given the responsibility of enforcing the laws, thereby maintaining justice to mankind today. If you would, let's look at Psalm 82, verses 2 through 4. The psalmist writes, "How long will you judge unjustly and accept the persons of the wicked? Defend the poor and the fatherless. Do justice to the afflicted and needy. Deliver the poor and needy. Rid them out of the hand of the wicked." Now, the word defend in this particular passage goes back to the word judge. Really means you judge them. Not that you're judging them fairly or unfairly, but because of their mistreatment, that judging is a defense for them. You're defending them from the unjust treatment of ungodly people. And so here's an instance we have here where we're told to enforce laws. And part of those enforcing laws is defending. But it's all about justice, making sure things are done correctly. And someone has to enforce the laws. So who? Who do we have enforcing the laws today? Who enforced the laws during the biblical times, both during the Old Testament period and the New Testament period? Christians often find themselves in a struggle with their conscience when they consider their relationship to civil government. Brother Jack pointed out David Lipscomb's view about voting. There are others in the past, preachers, who have held the same view, and even held the view that Christians should not be policemen or serve in the military in that capacity because of the role in which they play. I'm not going to read Romans 13. It's already been read several times. But I would like for you to think about verse 4. Because in Romans 13, verse 4, it tells us that God has these people who are to revenge Him, to take the vengeance for Him. That's the civil government. Who in civil government does that? If it's in fighting wars, it's going to be the military. When it's upholding laws of the land out on the streets, it's going to be your police. When it comes to enforcing those within a penal system, it's going to be your prisons. When it gets to the point of capital punishment, then it's going to be those people in the prisons who are taking charge of that. There are different roles in civil government that different ones play. However, when it comes to those roles of enforcing, military and police have those roles to play. We have the things that we must do. We're commanded in Romans 13:7 to render unto Caesar the things that are Caesar's. We have to obey the laws of the land. And yet some will make derogatory statements such as, well, can a Christian kill for his government? I've heard that before. Can you kill for your government? That's the wrong issue. That's the wrong question to ask as well. The issue is truly, can anyone, including a Christian, serve in the military or the police? Now, just as each speaker prior to my lesson has done, we'll go back to the Bible for the answers. Because it really doesn't matter what I think. It really doesn't matter what you think. It doesn't even matter what some liberal in Washington thinks. What it really boils down to is, what does the Bible teach? And that's the heart of this issue. Before we get into it, I'm going to get to my negatives and my positives, Brother Lavelle, before I run out of time. I thought I'd just start with this. And let's start with the negative. There are pacifists today who do not believe that Christians can be involved in any form of government, whether it's holding an office, whether it's being in the military, or being part of a police force. So I want to look at that argument, or those arguments against Christians being part of the military and or the police. The first one is that serving in the military or the police requires doing harm to others. They cite Matthew 22:39, where Jesus said, "Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself." And Paul, over in the book of Romans, quotes in Romans 13, once again, verses 9 and 10, "For this, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not kill," and they hinge everything on that statement, or almost all of it, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not bear false witness, thou shalt not cover, and if there be any other commandment, it is briefly comprehended in this saying, namely, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. Love worketh no ill to his neighbor. Therefore, love is a fulfilling of the law. So when people want to make this argument, they say, well, you have to love your enemy. You have to love your neighbor. You have to do good to people. And Romans 13 tells us that love does not work ill toward his neighbor. And since love is a fulfilling of the law, then according to this argument, that if you love your neighbor, you will not do any harm to your neighbor. You won't kill or injure your neighbor intentionally for any reason. And therefore, people are violating what Jesus and Paul preached if they're part of a military unit or a police department. And therefore, Christians can't serve. That's the argument. I'm not going to get into answering these arguments. I think they have merit. They don't. We're going to answer those when I get to the positive, where they can serve in the military and police. Because you'll see once I get through that these are going to be answered fully. Tertullian said, if we are enjoined to love our enemies, whom we have to hate, if we injure, we're forbidden to retaliate. Or if we are injured, we're forbidden to retaliate. Who then can suffer injury at our hands? They often use this quote to say, even Tertullian said that we need to be pacifists. We can't do anything that's going to harm others. Another argument is serving in the military or police requires one taking up the sword or a weapon. And Christians, particularly people who want to be in the military and police, can't be because they have to have a weapon. We'll talk about that a little bit more later as well. They quote Jesus again in Matthew 26:52, where Jesus said, put up thy sword into its place. For all who take the sword will perish by the sword. And so their argument is, well, if you carry a gun, you're going to be killed by a gun. Therefore, Christians shouldn't carry a gun because, number one, he shouldn't kill people because he's supposed to love his neighbor. And if he does, he's going to be killed by one and he'll deserve it. So Christians can't serve in the military or the police. Clement of Alexander said this, and they use this as their defense as well. If you enroll as one of God's people, heaven is your country and God your lawgiver. And what are his laws? Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. To him that strikes thee on the cheek, turn also the other. Again, the argument is, if someone harms you, take it and go on. Don't do anything about it. Because in our role as being loving people of this earth, we cannot defend ourselves. We cannot retaliate against anyone else for what they do to us. We're to turn the other cheek and let them do it again. I will say that I had a teacher when I was in Memphis School of Preaching who said if someone broke into his house, that he didn't have a gun, he didn't think a Christian ought to have a gun, he was a pacifist. And he stated that he would just preach to them and they'd put their gun down. He was reminded that after his head was blown off and his family killed, then they're going to rob his place. And he said, well, if that's what happens, that's what happens. Refused to defend and protect his own family. And I'm going to get to that later, and I have an issue with that. Because according to the Bible, that's a sin. And we'll deal with it. And I think you can already tell where I'm going with this. Another argument is the 10 Commandments for bad killing. Exodus 20:13, thou shalt not kill. The King James Version says that. The word kill in the King James Version means murder. There's a vast difference between killing and murder. Murder, and Brother Lavelle, I think, dealt with this masterfully, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that. When someone either through intent or through reckless nature kills another person, they can be held accountable for that either by murder or manslaughter. It could be a capital offense. It could be a first, second, or third degree. Or it could be homicide, which is a second degree, or rather not a homicide, but it could be a murder still, be killing someone, but not intentionally. I'll give you a good example. A drunk gets out on the highway and runs over people and kills them. That's manslaughter. It's a vehicular homicide. but it falls under that second-degree felony of what a manslaughter would be. Did that drunk intentionally get in the car to kill somebody? No. But through their reckless behavior and driving while intoxicated, they caused another person their life. They're going to be charged with it. If someone comes into your house with a gun and tries to kill you or your family, are you going to try to protect your family? I should hope so. But the argument here is the government is involved in killing people, but Christians should not be involved in the government that does that. We take a back seat to that. We're to be pacifists in that. The issue, again, I have with some of these views, and I don't have time to go through a lot of them. These are the only three I'm going to give you. Actually, I could spend an entire lesson just on their arguments and answering them. I looked at that, but I didn't want to spend my whole time looking at their arguments and try to answer them, because we can get the answer in some other scriptures. But there are a lot of arguments that deal with this. The problem with their arguments are they simply don't look at the context very often. And the context of these scriptures will very easily answer what these arguments are about. So let's get into the positive arguments for Christians serving in the military and police. The Bible does not specifically state anywhere that someone should serve in the military. At the same time, Christians can rest assured that being a soldier in the military can be a highly respected position, and it has been highly respected throughout Scriptures. And know that such service is consistent with biblical teaching. Now, what we see some people doing in the military, some of the soldiers that are immoral or ungodly, we cannot condone that. But you can say the same for the police as well. The things that I see that people are doing, even officers that are doing that are immoral or ungodly, that Christians don't do, doesn't make the whole profession immoral or sinful. In the Old Testament, the nation of Israel developed a standing army. God was initially and throughout the Old Testament really their divine warrior and would protect His people regardless of the military strength they had. However, they still had a military. When that standing army was developed through Saul, David, and Solomon, they began to grow. God had Israel fighting for Him among other nations. Most of the time because those other nations were trying to destroy Israel. However, God still had Israel to have an army. In the New Testament, we find that Jesus marveled when a Roman centurion approached Him. The centurion's response to Jesus indicated his clear understanding of authority as well as his faith in Jesus. Let's look over in Matthew chapter 8. In Matthew chapter 8, verses 5 through 13, I want to read this. And when Jesus entered into Capernaum, there came unto him a centurion, beseeching him, and saying, Lord, my servant lieth sick of the palsy, grievously tormented. Jesus said unto him, I will come heal him. The centurion answered and said, Lord, I am not worthy that thou shouldest come under my roof, but speak the word only, and my servant shall be healed. For I am a man of authority, having soldiers under me. And I say to this man, Go, and he goeth. And another, Come, and he cometh. And to my servant, Do this, and he doeth it. And when Jesus heard it, he marveled, and said unto them that followed, Verily I say unto you, I have not found so great a faith, no, not in Israel. And I say unto you that many shall come from the east, and from the west, and from the north, and sit down with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. But the children of the kingdom shall be cast into outer darkness, and there shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And notice what Jesus says unto the centurion. Go thy way, as thou hast believed, so it shall be done unto thee. And the servant was healed that selfsame hour. Now look in this passage and find somewhere where Jesus condemned this man for being in the army. Centurion is a man over 100 soldiers. He was a supervisor or a leader with rank in their army. And Jesus marveled at his faith. If it was sinful for someone to serve in the military, don't you think Jesus of all people would have said, Oh, and by the way, you need to leave your military service, because if you're going to follow me, this is just not acceptable. That's the Texas version, I guess, Jeff. Don't you think Jesus would have told him something like that? The Bible says Jesus marveled at the man's faith. He was a Roman centurion. He wasn't even a Jew. A Roman centurion, and he believed that Jesus could heal someone. He believed in him. And Jesus praised him for that, rather than condemning him for being in the military. Had it been a sin, Jesus would most definitely have told him that. There are many centurions mentioned throughout the New Testament that are praised either as Christians, God-fearers, or men of good character. Our text here in Matthew 8, Matthew 27, Mark 15, Luke 2, Luke 23, Acts 10, Cornelius. I'm going to talk about him later on in the lesson. Acts 21, when Paul's life was saved by the Roman soldiers from the mob that was trying to kill him. And again, Acts 28, when others were cast into prison, Paul was given his own hired house, though he was kept chained to a soldier. A lot of those soldiers were converted. The places and the titles may have changed, but our armed forces should be just as valued as the centurions of the Bible, those who did what was right, at least in the Bible. And those who read about in the New Testament who either were or became Christians, many of whom became Christians, or were devout men, or simply of good moral character, who are praised for the good things that they did. If it is sinful for a Christian to be a soldier, now I want you to think about this argument, then it's sinful for anyone to serve in the military. The argument is Christians shouldn't do it, let the heathens and the sinners of the world do it. If it's a sin for a Christian, it's a sin for anyone. And I'm going to get to the argument just in a minute and prove it. Same goes with the police. If it's a sin for a person to be a police officer, a Christian to be a police officer, it's a sin for anyone to be a police officer, and all who are will be doomed to hell. Now I'm amazed that brethren can write articles about marriage, divorce, and remarriage, proving that God has one law for mankind, and say that the non-Christian is amenable to God's one law just as the Christians are. And yet they come up with a second law for military service or for physical warfare. You can't have one without the other, folks. If there's one law in the Bible for all people, that one law is going to be for whatever people do, whether it's serving in the government, in local, state, or national levels, whether it's someone as a Christian becoming the President of the United States and holding on to his or her morals. It's still going to be one law. And so it's either right for anyone to serve or it's wrong for anyone to serve. Can't have it both ways, because God's law is the same for everybody. I have a problem understanding how some can even teach that the death penalty is commanded by God. Again, I told Brother Lavelle I don't even have to spend much time on this because he took care of that whole subject. And we know that it's the case, and we know the Bible teaches it. He quoted very aptly Genesis 9:6. But then believes that the man who carries out the death penalty is doomed to hell for obeying the very command God gave him to do. Romans 13, if man has been put in civil government to carry out God's vengeance on this earth, then who better to carry it out than Christians? Just think about it. As far as the death penalty is concerned, how can someone carry out what God said and then God damn them to hell for killing someone or putting someone to death when He told them to do it? That would make God an unjust God. I don't serve that kind of God. The God of heaven is not that kind of God, because the God of heaven said, here's what you do to these people. Our death penalty is for capital murder, for the killing of someone. Brother Vale spent time dealing with all the things in the Old Testament that you could be put to death for. I believe our population to be thinned way out. You wouldn't have to worry about traffic on the road for sure, because you wouldn't see a lot of people on the roads anymore if it was carried out today as it was taught back in the Old Testament. But it had to be carried out by someone. Someone has to be man. and it's going to be man, why not better to be a Christian? Next, if it is sinful for a Christian to be in the military or the police, then wouldn't it be just as wrong for us to use those services? Think about that as well. If it's wrong for a Christian to be in the military and police, why do we want to call the police when something bad happened to us? We got somebody coming that's, if Christians can't serve, and it's all heathen serving, so you got a heathen coming to protect you against other heathens, and I know that is the case in a lot of places. Christians in the police and the military are definitely the minority. But if it was a sin to serve, you got some rank heathen sinner that really doesn't care about you anyway. He's going to come and take care of you. Why would you even want to call him? One argument I read, and I didn't even put it in this, but I'll mention it, is why would you want somebody to come deal with a situation that may cost them their life and you know they're going to go to hell because they're not a Christian? Why would you not rather have a Christian who's faithful come take care of that? Who better to come to your aid as a police officer, or who better to protect your country than a Christian in the military or the police who is a Christian? That's the point. Why then we want to use services only provided by heathens when we could have those serving who could make the difference and bring a positive change to even the military and the police? Next, Christians have no right to seek personal vengeance because vengeance belongs to God. You think about it. Somebody makes me mad, then I pull my gun out and shoot him because I'm mad at him. That's personal vengeance. The Bible condemns that, folks. Now, if I'm attacked, I've got a right to protect myself. But if someone calls me ugly, say, well, thank you, you're telling the truth. I arrested someone one time. They were calling me all kind of names. I said, well, there's a few I hadn't heard before, but they called me big, fat, and ugly. I said, well, I'm not too big. I know I'm ugly. And I just made them madder. I said, just tell me something I don't know. I did go on a call one night of a woman who shot her daughter. It's an older woman, I think, if I remember right, late 60s. Shot her 35, 36-year-old daughter for calling her a bad name. She did call her a pretty vulgar name. Mama got mad and shot her in the leg with a .38 special. So you don't call me that name. This is my house. Well, you can't do that. You can't do that. That's taking vengeance where vengeance is not deserved. Romans 13 says there are people who are there to take the vengeance. Romans 12:19. And let's turn over there and look at that just for a moment. I'm glad it was said earlier, and I don't remember who said this. I'm glad Romans 12 is in the Bible because it goes right along with Romans 13, if you think about it. Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. Now we're going to go on down into chapter 3, so let's read these next two verses of 12. Therefore, if thine enemy hunger, feed him. If he thirst, give him drink. For in doing so thou shalt heap coals of fire on his head. Be not overcome of evil, but overcome evil with good. Let every soul be subject to the higher powers, for there is no power of God but the powers that are ordained of God. Whoso resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God, for they that resist shall receive in themselves damnation. Chapter 12 continues into chapter 13. Remember, it was man who broke the Bible up into chapter and verses. He says you don't take vengeance, that belongs to God. He goes right on into it. Now you love your enemies, you treat them well. You don't be overcome of evil, but you overcome evil with good. How do you do that? You are subject to the higher powers of the civil government, and you let the government take care of the vengeance. You can't have chapter 12 verse 19 stand alone with that going down into chapter 13. They go together. And God set forth vengeance and where He wanted that vengeance taken care of, and those to whom that was to mete out that vengeance, the civil government, which often comes through your military and police. And it will come through judges in court. It will come through those in the penal institutions. God has set forth the standard that He wants, and that's a standard we must follow. We cannot take personal vengeance upon anyone. It's not our place. If I get mad at my neighbor, I can't go shoot my neighbor because I don't like my neighbor. But if my neighbor comes over with a gun and said, I'm going to take this from you and you're not going to stop me, or I'm going to kill your family and there's nothing you're going to do about it, then I've got a right to protect myself then. I'm not going over to him. He's bringing the fight to me. And then if I'm any kind of person I should be, I'm not only going to protect myself, but I will protect my family. But God commands the punishment of the evildoers to be done by the government. Look over in 1 Peter chapter 2. That was alluded to this morning. 1 Peter 2 verses 13 and 14. Submit yourselves under every ordinance of God, or every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether it be for the king supreme or governors, as unto them that are sent by him for the punishment of evildoers, and for the praise of them that do well. Very similar to what Paul wrote in Romans 13, isn't it? That we submit ourselves unto every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake. Civil government, to the laws. We don't have to agree with every law. I know the abortion issue came up earlier. We don't agree with that. I'll fight tooth and nail of that. That doesn't mean I'm going to go blow up an abortion clinic or go shoot the doctors at the abortion clinic. What I'm going to do is exercise my right, as Jack talked about earlier, about voting, and try to vote people in who will put people in the Supreme Court ultimately who can change the Roe versus Wade law to make it illegal once again, because it's already immoral and sinful, but our country doesn't recognize that. But I'm hoping that one day that we could have some people in who would overturn that law. That's the way we fight against abortion. We don't fight against abortion clinics with violence, because that's us personally taking vengeance where we don't have the right to take it. We're seeking it out rather than doing it in a proper way. Soldiers and police officers are servants of that civil government, carrying out God's law. Now let's briefly look at some New Testament examples. In Luke chapter 3, verse 14, there were some soldiers who came to John the Baptizer as he was baptizing people, and they asked, "What shall we do?" Here's John's response. "Do not intimidate anyone or accuse falsely, and be content with your wages." Now here's some examples of people coming to a person, John the Baptizer, and he had a great opportunity to preach to them, and he did. And if it were a sin for them to be in the military, don't you think John would have said something? John did not tell them to leave the army. John said, don't falsely accuse people, don't intimidate people, don't mistreat people, and be satisfied with your pay. Don't complain about it. That's what he told them they need to do. He could have said, well, if you want to obey what I'm preaching, then you need to leave the military. He didn't say that. He did tell them what to do. Cornelius, the first Gentile convert, Acts chapter 10, verses 1 and 2. He believed the gospel as a Roman soldier. And it says a centurion of what was called the Italian regiment, a devout man and one who feared God with all his household, who gave alms generously to the people and prayed to God always. Peter was sent to tell him words that he needed to hear, whereby he and his household could be saved. Acts 10:6 and 10:22. Peter went and preached to him. Does it say anywhere in that text that he told him, oh, by the way, before you can be baptized and become a Christian, you have to leave your military service? He didn't tell him that. He didn't tell him to leave his career. But there are three things that jump out in Acts 10:1 and 2 to me. The Bible calls this man devout, God-fearing, even though he was a centurion, that he prayed to God and he gave alms to people. He gave money to other people. He was hospitable. He was a giver, a God-fearing man, one who prayed, and God, it tells us, heard his prayer. And he was a Roman centurion, military man. And he never was told to leave his military post. Next, what does the Bible say about anyone in general wanting to protect themselves? Now, I'm going to wrap it up with this point. And Bruce, this was not in the subject. Can someone can a Christian serve in the military and the police? I can sum everything up right here in this last point. It really doesn't matter if you're serving in the military or police or not. It boils down to this: do you have a God-given right as a citizen of this country, as a human being on this earth, to protect yourself and your family. Absolutely. I'm going to look at some arguments for that now. Because it doesn't matter whether you serve in the military or police. I've been in the police for almost 8 years now. I've been carrying a concealed weapon 26 years now. And I did that to protect me and my family. After we moved to Alabama from Mississippi where I was preaching, we were there maybe a week or two. A little small rural area. You didn't see a lot of crime, not a lot of problems. But I went to the county courthouse, to the sheriff's office himself, and I walked up to the clerk and said, I want to get a permit to carry a pistol. She said, here's a piece of paper to fill out. That time, you didn't have to go through anything, not even a background check. They said, fill this piece of paper out. Well, it said, the reason you want to carry your gun in public. I left it blank. I'm thinking, is that a trick question? I was going to wait and talk to somebody about that, so I filled everything else out. Well, it wasn't the clerk that took my paper. It was the sheriff himself. He walked up and he looked at the paper and said, you left this blank. Why do you want to carry? I said, well, I thought that was obvious for protection. He slid it over and said, write it down. So I wrote protection down. He said, you ain't aiming to go out and shoot anybody today, are you? I said, no, sir. He signed it and said, okay, you pay me $5 and here's your permit. That's all it was. No background check, nothing like that. But you got to realize that was 26 years ago. I think they've changed a little bit since then. Why do you want to carry? For protection. Okay, here you go. Sign it and give me some money. I gave him a little money. He wrote out a card, laminated it, gave it to me, and said, there's your permit. Now go out shooting a bunch of people. You don't have to be in the military or in the police to carry a weapon. And I am not even going to ask you to raise your hands or hold them up if you got them. But I imagine in this audience there are probably several people who have a weapon on them. And if you don't, I'll almost say shame on you. We live in a society now where we have to protect ourselves. Someone asked me, why as a policeman do you carry, or why do you want to be a policeman and carry a gun as a Christian? I had that question asked to me. 2012 out in California. I went out to preach a meeting. Said, you don't have to be a policeman to carry a gun. I didn't even have to answer the question. There's one of the members there told the man how stupid he was for asking it. He was actually a visitor. He wasn't a member there. He told him how stupid he was for asking the question. And he said, this man's here to protect your life. Wouldn't you rather have somebody like him than what you see it running around out here protecting you? And he said, I just have an issue with a Christian carrying a gun. I said, I have an issue with one who won't carry one. Because you've got to protect yourself and your family. And we're living in days now you don't have to worry, you better worry about knives too. But anything can be a weapon. But why would I want to carry a knife when I can carry something else? When I can protect my family. And that's what it comes down to, is protection of our family. I had a guy that I arrested one day. He said, I'm going to find out where you live and I'm going to come kill you and your whole family. I'm going to let you watch me kill your whole family and then I'm going to kill you. I said, you want me to give you the address? I hope you come to my house. Because I said, I got at least one that'll drop you before you ever get in my driveway. And if I see you coming up my driveway, I'll wait till you get in my driveway and I'm going to put you down. That was all on camera, by the way. And the DA heard it. And I told him I said it when I took the guy to jail. And then he got felony retaliation charges filed against me and my family because he threatened to kill a police officer and his family. So he added another felony to what I already got on him because he wanted to open his mouth and run it. Now I've told anybody, you come to my house, you better be prepared because I am. If you get in the door, you won't get out alive. And it's not my desire ever to kill anyone, either as a law enforcement officer or as a Christian. But I'm going to protect my family. And that's what it boils down to. Moses came to the defense of one of his brethren who was being beaten by an Egyptian. You remember that account in Exodus chapter 2? And Moses killed the Egyptian to save someone else's life. And then when he saw two Hebrews the next day, they were squabbling. He said, what are you going to do, kill us? Pharaoh found out and sought Moses' life. He had to flee Egypt. Was Moses wrong with what he did? He protected one of his own brethren. By the way, in Texas, It is the law that you have the right not only to defend yourself, but to defend a third party. Your neighbor, your friend, another family member, somebody in public is a stranger. I've seen YouTube videos and police videos that I get on email a lot where police officers have been attacked and citizens came to their aid. I saw where one shot someone that was killing a police officer. He was choking the police officer to death. He'd already disarmed him, got the gun away, and he was choking him. Man walked up behind and shot the bad guy in the head and killed him. You think charges was filed against that man? No, he's protecting someone else. In the state of Texas, it allows you to protect a third party legally without having the legal repercussions of going to prison for taking someone's life if you're doing it in defense of a third party. Moses did it in the defense of a third party. It wasn't even someone attacking him, yet he had to kill a man to save someone else. God doesn't condemn him in that passage, does he? Luke chapter 10, verse 27, Jesus teaches we love our neighbors as ourselves. Just as this means to do them no harm, as the pacifist view states, it also implies that we're to see that no harm comes to them. Remember the golden rule. The way we put it, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. If someone's attacking me, I sure would hope someone come to my defense if I couldn't get to a weapon, or if I couldn't defend myself. I'd hope someone would help me. And if I see someone being attacked, you can rest assured I'm going to jump in there and help them. It may cost me my life in doing it, but I'm going to help someone to keep them from being harmed or killed. That's part of being a Christian. And people don't see that and they don't understand that, but part of being a Christian is that. That's following the golden rule. If I'm protecting someone's life, I'm following exactly what the golden rule teaches. We must also consider what Christ told his disciples in his last hours with them. Luke 22:36 says, "Now he who has a money bag, let him take it, and likewise a sack. And he who has no sword, let him sell his garment and buy one." Jesus told his disciples, you go buy a weapon, buy a sword. Keep in mind, folks, that the sword was the finest offensive weapon available to an individual soldier in the first century. I would say that would be equivalent to the M4s today, or a military so-called assault rifle today. We have people wanting to get rid of them. We need them. We need what they've got in case our government does turn on us, because we don't need protection against the deer. They say you don't need an assault rifle to go hunt deer. I'm not hunting deer with them. I got other rifles to hunt deer with. That's for protection. And I got plenty of ammo to go along with that for that protection. But that's what we're to do, is protect ourselves. And Jesus told his disciples, you go buy a sword if you ain't got one. Get something to protect yourself. If Jesus said it and authorized it, then why can't we do the same thing today? Finally, if any will provide not for his own, especially those of his own household, he has denied the faith and worse than an infidel. Paul wrote Timothy, 1 Timothy 5:8. This passage applies to our subject, because it would be absurd to buy a house and furnish it with food and facilities for our family, yet not put locks on the doors to protect them, or not have some weapon in the house to try to help them in case someone does break in. I've talked to people on numerous occasions who told me, well, I've been afraid of guns. I don't know about going out and shooting a gun. I probably need one, but I'm a little scared of them. Well, a healthy fear of them is good, but having a total terror of them is really not. I've seen people who have been afraid of them in the past who went out and shot and said, oh, this is not so bad. And they learn how to shoot and learn how to be safe with them and purchase one themselves and carry. My wife was one of them. She had not shot guns when we started dating. I took her out and we started shooting. She went through a lot of my ammo because she had so much fun shooting with .22 especially. I taught her how to shoot a pistol, and now she won't go anywhere without it. And I've told people, either go to a gun range and find you an instructor. I'm not an instructor, but if you feel comfortable with me going to a gun range with you, I'll go to a gun range and show you the safety that I know and that I've been taught, show you how to shoot, and then you can get one and start carrying it yourself. We need to be able to protect our families, whether it's the man of the house. There's some ladies that are widows, some who are single. There's single mothers raising children. They need to know how to protect their children. You don't get close to Mama Bear. I know she'll hurt you. Mamas will protect their children. But what better way to do that in their home if someone comes in with a gun to be able to answer that threat with a gun? Well, I added a few more points to the end. My wife said I wouldn't have time, and Bruce, I don't, so I'm just going to skip those, and we'll close out. Not everyone should be a police officer or serve in the military because some lack sound judgment, some lack character and integrity. But don't hate on those who serve. Support them. A Christian involved in the military or police work is doing a good and a godly thing. The police officer and the military officer who enforces just laws of the land should consider himself or herself God's servant, and toward the lawbreaker, an agent of God's wrath that was sent to keep the peace. One of the most important jobs of every police officer is the restraint of evil in society. It is a dangerous career. It is a professional that is congruent with biblical desire for justice and righteousness, one that is upheld by the Bible, and we've seen over and over again with those in the military service and the police or paramilitary positions that would go along with that military service. We see that it is upheld in the Bible, and I see no reason why one could not serve. Matter of fact, it is noble to serve. I enjoy it. It is dangerous, but it's something I like doing. I've enjoyed serving in EMS in the past. I worked on the volunteer ambulance service when I was in college. I worked as a firefighter in a volunteer fire department, became the fire chief. Served in that capacity for almost 6 years before moving here to Texas. And now serving as a police officer. I like doing that. I like serving and helping people. But we also like helping people with the gospel. And people, no matter what you do for them physically, is not enough unless you teach them what to do to be saved. As we close this afternoon, if you're here and you're not a Christian, you need to be saved. Because at this point you're lost, undone, outside of the body of Christ, and you need to come to Jesus today. Do you believe with all your heart Jesus Christ is the Son of God? If you do, then why not come repenting of your sins, change your life, and turn to God. Confess your faith in Jesus Christ as God's Son, and we'll immerse you in baptism for the remission of your sins. As you're buried in the waters of baptism, the sins that were in your life will be washed away. You'll rise to walk in newness of life, Romans 6, 1 through 4. Serving God as a new creation in Him, a child of God, a Christian. Do so faithfully, and heaven will be your home. As a child of God, if you've wandered from your path of righteousness that you should be following, if you're not living the Christian life as you should be, why not come back? Repent of your sins, confess them, and we'll pray for you. Once again, start living a faithful life, and heaven will be your home. If you are subject in any way, come right now. While together we stand, while we sing.